Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Pfeiffer, VP AI and Agentic Commerce here at Shopware. And I have the privilege to welcome back a guest that we had on stage here last year at SCD, Ryan Prichard, Senior Vice President, Payment Services and Crypto Engineering at PayPal. And some of you saw him on stage here last year share PayPal's vision for AI-driven commerce. And we want to talk a bit about what has happened since then and what PayPal is doing to prepare merchants for the next era of commerce. So, please join me in welcoming Ryan Prichard.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here again. So let's get started.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Ryan, last year you shared a bit about where commerce is heading and especially what PayPal is doing to prepare merchants for the next era of agentic commerce. And if we fast forward back to today, the conversation seems to have shifted dramatically compared to last year. What would you say is most different this year?
Yeah, for sure. I think last year there was a lot of vision conversations happening. I think it's transitioned from vision more to deployable infrastructure, and specifically around protocols and standards. You saw a number of them now supported in Shopware, which is great. So you start to see sort of the foundation, the infrastructure of agentic commerce really coming, to life. And I will say there's a lot of momentum and a lot of traction in the infrastructure that has scaled much faster than consumer behavior. But that's really probably not a surprise if you think about like the early innovations, big innovations. It's the same trend that happens there. When the internet was formed, tons of things were out there on the, tons of websites, but like nothing meaningful until things really scaled up. Same thing with mobile apps. So we see the same pattern here, the infrastructure leading before the customer behavior. But the one thing, and I know this has been talked about here a couple of times, that has scaled and has definitely been confirmed with some really interesting metrics behind it, is the AI-assisted product discovery. I'm sure everyone here has used AI to find products. But last year, I think some real numbers behind it, anywhere between 5 to 7x increase in agentic-led commerce. You see conversion rates now around 30 to 40% higher for those who are compared to organic transactions. And AOV is higher and somewhere in the mid-teens, depending on where you're looking. So, now, you get more familiarity. There's a lot of traction there and also really high intent users that are ready to purchase from there. But now from a protocol and standards perspective, it moves on sort of the next wave, which is all the checkout stuff. So carrying out the transaction. And there we see two, primary protocols and a third one I'm quite bullish on though as well. And with ACP and UCP, the primary protocols, and it offers sort of a spectrum of different merchant and consumer experiences, right? UCP is a little bit more inline. You start from product discovery all the way through inline. That experience with ACP, there's a little bit of a change over the last 6 months or so, right? That was originally intended to be inline, and then it's like, okay, we're going to actually just kick it off into a deep link MCP app to finish off the checkout. And I think what was realized was that checkout is really hard. We've been at it for 25 years, as an example, right? And so, you start to see now a little bit of a hybrid, right? Where it's like all done on not only the LM surface, now kicked over a little bit to something controlled by the merchants, right? So that's kind of compelling. And then the third one that I'm quite bullish on, but it's very, very early days, is WebMCP. This is something that's backed by both Microsoft and Google. What I find interesting there is that for those who don't know, it's effectively it's creating a same type of interface for agents, but all through a browser. So you basically publish tools and you can interface with it. An agent interfaces just like they would like a regular MCP tool. But the interesting thing there is that that's completely on the merchant's surface right there, right? So now you have the potential to have your own website for humans interacting with it. And for any of those who've built agents or are trying to interact with websites to actuate, either purchases or do anything, it's extremely expensive and laborious. This streamlines it a lot, right? And plus you get some of the benefit of identity of a customer because you can share session and cookie information. So again, spectrum all the way from like completely on the LLM surface to a hybrid to completely on the merchant side. It's really sort of interesting. And then you carry that forward a little bit more. Now you start talking about autonomous commerce, and in there, a lot of the payment protocols and specs and things that we're involved in are now starting to work through. Okay, well, how do we think about the liability and trust factor, right? And it's about taking the intent of the consumer that provided to the agent, and then basically encoding that all throughout the transactions, so that it's for disputes and liability. You have that entire traceability there as well, and so that's further along. You know what I mean? But it's great to see so many companies and so much energy put behind these standards, and I think that's kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely. With what you mentioned, there are two threads that I would like to pull on. The first one was basically you're saying, if we look at the conversation last year, it was just OpenAI had announced instant checkout. The entire conversation was, okay, the LLM surface is going to capture discovery all the way through checkout, and then the merchant has to worry about fulfillment and aftercare and so on. What you're saying is what we've seen since is that reality has manifested in discovery, but it hasn't reached transaction checkout and beyond yet.
At meaningful scale.
At meaningful scale. Yeah. What are some of the things that you think need to happen for that to be the case? So if we look at the next 12 months, and you talked especially about like laying the infrastructure, what do you think are some of the things that need to happen for that to become reality?
Yeah, I think the primary thing for real adoption to take on is going to be the same thing that was important, when e-commerce took off, which is you got to build. The trust has to be there and liability has to be figured out, right? And that's just beginning. That you have to create an amazing user experience as well. And so as these different approaches are starting to take shape and customers will act with their money and their feet, I think those will continue to evolve to a point where it's acceptable, and streamlined from there. I think that's number one. Trust and liability really has to be there as well. And then I think you start to see the adoption, right? And you start to see, the reason why I wanted to make like a distinction between at scale versus not is, there's some interesting closed loop examples of agentic commerce where you can kind of see the end to end, but that's usually on one contained area, right? It's not open, right? So that's really the holy grail right there.
Okay, yeah. Another thing that you mentioned that I think is very interesting is a lot of the conversation over the last year was about non-owned environments. So surfaces that I, as the merchant, don't own, but of course want to be present in, whether that's ChatGPT, whether that's Gemini.
Yep.
And since then, of course, the conversation has also shifted to more including owned environments. So whether that's my app, my store, and so on. And of course, we've shared a lot today in what we as Shopware provide to merchants, both for the non-owned environments, where we have the agentic sales channels.
Yep.
And then as well for the owned environments, for example, the Experience Studio, but also other things that we're doing to really enable merchants in their owned environments. What is maybe some of the ways that PayPal is supporting merchants in both of those environments, and especially also as you think about collaborating with Shopware there?
Yeah, I think you call out some really good ones. Obviously, our partnership that started last year on our Store Sync, making sure that we can get customers on LLMs is sort of important. Making that really easy for merchants to be able to control what they want in different distribution channels. And that's an important thing as people are getting into, the long tail of agentic commerce, right? It's like making sure your inventory, your product catalog stuff, everything is up to date, but also the control surface. How do you make sure that the exact products you want, the pricing inventory is exactly aligned to those types of LLMs or distribution channels that you do want. I think that's part of the beginning from there, and then as we start to suss out kind of where the market is going, just making sure that you've got a trusted partner to make sure that as protocols are changing, we're there to help you navigate those different protocols. That's the key thing that we're focusing on.
Yeah. We've had the luxury of working together closely both on the product side, but then also having you as a partner in the Agentic Commerce Alliance.
Yep.
And something that I really appreciate about this partnership is that you have a very unique vantage point, right? You have a lot of information about merchants, consumers, and then also interactions with the AI platforms. From that vantage point, if you're a merchant, what should you be paying attention to right now?
Yeah. The first thing is, going back to the first point we talked about, is AI-led product discovery is here now. Make sure that that's table stakes. So this is where your product catalog, especially if you're a goods-based business, is really important. Make sure pricing, making sure inventory is up to speed and up to date. And then the next thing from there is making sure that you're skating to kind of where the puck's going to be, to use the Wayne Gretzky analogy, which is if you pattern match across those three paradigms that I said for agentic checkout, it's important to make sure all of your commerce workflows are exposed through APIs, right? And so obviously when you're working with Shopware, you have that in your commerce platform, but then you start exposing it through things like UCP and MCP. So if you look at those, like that's really the two key areas that I see, is making sure that you have interfaces that can be called from MCP, because it's kind of a universal bus for agents. And I think those are the key things. And then as you're mentioning sort of the alliance, the third thing I would say is that it's important to be up to speed with what's going on, right? And so we had a good conversation yesterday around, you have to be market aware, right? Because especially when you're thinking about things like liability and, each market is a little bit different, right? And so we've been talking about and working through ideas like playbooks that we can provide merchants to make it a little bit easier. Like how do you, what's your assessment on your maturity in agentic commerce? So, I think it's looking forward to that partnership and providing some more content for merchants.
Yeah. You specifically mentioned markets, and of course, a lot of our merchants are European headquartered.
Yep.
Do you want to share anything that PayPal is doing for, supporting European merchants specifically?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to talk about I love to talk about our buy now, pay later products. My main background actually is in financial lending. And when I came back to PayPal many years ago, my charter was to kind of reboot buy now, pay later for PayPal. And so we started in France. That was our first market. Then we followed that up with the UK, and then we did the US. And so I've got a strong love for our buy now, pay later products. But we continue to grow that. We've grown that a lot over the years. And so just last month, we expanded into Austria. We did our pay in 30, so try before buy type of use cases there, as well as our Ratenzahlung or installments products there. So we're excited about that one. In markets that we were already in, Italy and Spain, we started to expand that portfolio on the installment. So longer term, 6, 12, 24 months, higher AOV for merchants there. And then here in Germany, we've had installments and buy now, pay later for a long time here. But this year we rolled out the installments in-store capability. So you open up your PayPal app, you can apply for a loan, and you can use it in store, which is really great. So all of that we can continue to grow and make sure that just comes together with the PayPal payments capability as a merchant that you've integrated with. And then, I'd obviously be remiss if I didn't mention the Shopware payments that we're supporting as well. And that was a really exciting project that we got to co-author as well. So yeah, a lot of work in Europe.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great place to land. Yep. So if you want to learn more about Shopware payments, please go next to the commerce stage where the PayPal team is going to share some more insights. So give it up for Ryan. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.